Welcome to this beautiful episode of Simply Sarah. I'm Sarah Stock, I'm your host, and just so pleased that you are here, whether you were watching or listening and as a podcast, and knowing that our incredible audience is international, whether you are listening to it live or that you are listening to it when it works into your schedule. Thank you so much for gifting us the opportunity to share with you. Every single one of our guests is somebody who's been carefully selected because they bring something to the table. They offer something to help lift us up, to help expand our mind. And today will be absolutely just like that. It's going to be fabulous. Before we get started, we just want to say thank you so much to our paid sponsors for Field Trip in New York and also Glass Arts Collective in Los Angeles. And thank you so much for your continued support and also for our guest today, Krista Powell. We are delighted that you are here. Welcome, friend.
Thank you so much. Such an honor to be here.
Krista, how did you get to where you are now coaching? What was your road to this space of having the Golden Shift coaching?
Well, I spent 25 years in a corporate job, and it got to the point where I just felt very stuck, very unsatisfied with the job. And this coincided with that feeling in my personal life as well. It's just this restlessness and belief that there was something more. One day I remember waking up in my bed, and I tend to get up before everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I had this sense of just being so alone, and it didn't make sense to me. My kids were sleeping in the other room. My dog was on the floor beside me. I had a loving husband in bed beside me. I was literally surrounded by people, and I couldn't make sense of why I felt alone. As I sat there trying to get curious about this sensation, this belief, this thought, this story, this insight came to me that my husband didn't really know me. He didn't know all of me. And the aloneness I was feeling was a sensation of these walls that I had built around myself to try to shield those parts of me that I didn't think were lovable, that I didn't think were what he expected. And of course, all of this was done unconsciously, subconsciously. I didn't intentionally do this.
Right.
And so this started the process of starting to unfold and bring these parts of me to the surface, really for my own benefit. I think my husband, my kids, we know the flaws of the people in our family, but it was just admitting that they were there. And that started a journey of my own path of opening. And then that just naturally led to starting to guide other people on a similar journey.
When you had this awakening and truly waking up in the morning awakening, in that space, did you envision leaving your corporate America job and coaching, or were you in that space of realizing, set in that space, and that the idea, the concept of coaching came later on?
Definitely the idea of leaving my job was there for several years before I actually did it. But coaching was a separate decision, a separate path. It was probably 6 years after starting down the path of change that coaching became a reality. I think I had to go through the process of growing and changing and expanding before I realized that what a gift this was, and how much other people needed to know this was a possibility as well.
Yes. So what did that lead you to? What does Golden Shift coaching provide, friend?
Well, I am a pleasure coach, so I like to say that I help women feel alive in their body. I help women break the fake rules that we don't even know we are following. It is really a becoming of ourselves. It is getting out of our heads. We are, coming here from the United States, where we put so much value on our external production. What can we put out in the world? And this is giving us a little bit of a gift of slowing down, connecting with our body, and just allowing us to be worthy without any of these other things that we are doing.
Oh, that's so well said. I know that one of the things that you have talked about that I found myself on a walk, I was um, following you on Instagram, and you had talked about the differentiation between body shaming and body neutral. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because there are so many of these fake rules that we are trying to follow, and advertisements, whether it's print or it's moving, whatever it happens to be, is telling us what we need to look like, how we need to sound. It needs to telling us what our shoe size should be, everything about us. And yet we are such individual beings that what brings joy and pleasure to one person is not necessarily going to be what it is for somebody else. So that space of talking about body shaming and body neutral just stopped me. I literally stopped to read the rest of the post because I was like, I've got to understand this before I can continue my walk.
Yes, and body image was a huge part of my particular journey of being vulnerable and feeling that trust in the relationship, and realizing that I did not want to put pleasure on hold for me or for my husband or for anyone until I had the body, the perfect body. And so part of my journey was finding the strength, the confidence to be able to say to my husband, like, my body has changed a lot since we met. I've had 3 children, including twins. Like, nothing has gone back the way that it was to begin with. And there's a lot of shame in that. And there's a lot of disappointment and a lot of feelings that I had let him down. And so being able to verbalize that out loud and still have him receive and love me and tell me that things are perfect the way they are was an important step in my process. And so body confidence, body neutrality doesn't mean that we don't want to still take care of our body, that we don't still want to pursue a different level of health. It just means we are not tying our worth to what we look like. There is not one way that our body should look. And I think that is part of it, of not buying into this idea that women have to look a certain way, that men have to look a certain way in order to be loved and to have pleasure in their lives.
So true. And this concept of us changing, our bodies are literally changing every day. We have parts of our brain that have new cells every second or less. We have parts of our body that take up to 6 or 7 years for the cells to be completely changed out. But our bodies, within 7 years, every single cell is changed. We are literally changing all of the time. And recently, having a conversation with my nearly 90-year-old mom, she was saying, I weigh the same. And then she kind of giggled, but she says, it's kind of moved around differently. And I just thought, what an interesting way of saying that she does. She weighs the same as what she did decades ago. But the way that she carries it does look different now. And it looked, different 40 years ago as well. So that space of just knowing that we are changing. And just read an article this morning on BBC about Cindy Crawford and how she got to about 35 and she thought, this might be the point that my career is over as a model. And then thought, there's this beautiful older French woman that women and how they look. Is there a way of being able to move into that space? And went to a doctor there and then began doing things and began selling those products as well. The point of this, though, is that she is now, decades later, still modeling and still saying it's about who we are. It's about aging with grace. It's not about trying to be a certain age again. And I sent that to dear friends of mine who own a salon, and they have been talking about this as well. How can we open this conversation to talk about being okay with where we are in our particular space in life without the shame part of it? And the shame part is I am, and then fill in the blank. And it's going to be negative versus guilty, which is I feel like I haven't shown up in the ways that I could have. And the guilt part is something that we can actually move and change and say, hey, I want to shift this and do something about it. So I love that you were talking about this space of body shaming, because I've never heard it called body guilty, right? It's always I am, not I am feeling.
Yes, yes, and it is, and you've mentioned this aspect of aging, because so many of us believe that pleasure is limited to the young, to the beautiful, to the rich, and
Mm.
that's not the way it is. There's so much beauty and elegance and grace in our bodies as we get older and we have this wisdom. I think one of the, we don't talk a lot about some of the blessings of social media, but one thing that I love is the conversation around menopause and aging for women that seems much more present now than it was 10 years ago. And maybe that's just because I'm entering into the space of starting to think that way. But to have this dialogue and seeing women so strong and so confident and so outspoken as they continue to age is a beautiful thing. And I personally intend to embrace pleasure until my last breath. Like, this is something we should be
Yes.
doing every day, and it is not limited and doesn't get cut off when you're 35 or 40 or 55 or 70. It keeps going.
Yes. You talk a little bit in your work about ways of developing pleasure, what that looks like in day-to-day kinds of things. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back on the other side, we'd love for you to share some of those parts.
Wonderful.
Glass Arts Collective is doing something so fun and amazing. Believing that all of us are creative, they are opening up their Instagram page for people who are creating things to be able to post those things there. I also believe that you are creative, and I'm super excited about this opportunity to be supporting Glass Arts Collective. They are amazing. So excited for this conversation with Krista. Krista and I met a few months ago, and we were taking a class together. And in this class by Jasmine Starr, we were encouraged to find an accountability group. And so there was this place for us to go in and write a little bit about ourselves and what time zone we were in. And Krista reached out, and I am just so delighted because she is truly a member of my team in terms of we meet on a consistent basis as businesswomen, encouraging each other. And I'm just so grateful for the work that you do and who you are, Krista.
Thank you. I feel exactly the same way about you, Sarah. You are such a gift in my life.
Talking about pleasure, how are things that we can do, or what are things that we can do, or how can we be expanding this space of understanding what pleasure means to us individually?
Yes, there are two things that I like to invite people to start with. And the first is the idea that pleasure is a practice. And so it's not something that we're going to get right away. And it is also something that evolves with us. So when we think about things with practice, what comes to mind for me is yoga. And you may hear yoga instructors saying, you are here with the body you have today. This is not about achieving anything. It is about being present with who you are. And it is a practice. You keep showing up for yourself and you keep learning. Same with maybe learning an instrument. You keep practicing to develop that skill set. So that's number one, is to recognize that this is an ongoing activity and it's going to be refined as we learn about ourselves even better. The second thing is that when we think of pleasure, I like to think of it in relation to four different parts of ourselves. So we have our mind, we have our physical body, we have what you might call your heart or your emotional center, and then your soul, your spirit, your energy, whatever word resonates with you. So we really want to have a broad idea of ways that we can invite pleasure into our lives. So as I knew I was going to be talking with you today, I was like, well, how can I focus on pleasure as I'm doing my morning routine? So the two ways that I did it this morning, maybe three. The first one was I took a cup of coffee as I went to go run an errand, and my coffee, it was terrible today. I don't know what was going on. And
So
so
sorry. It should always be this beautiful way of starting the day. I'm so sorry it was terrible.
I know, but do you know what I did? Even though I had this perfectly fine cup of coffee, I went to a store and bought a different one. And that just felt so decadent, so like, I don't know, almost like a rebellious to have this perfectly fine cup of coffee, and yet I still spent too much money on a different cup. But that was pleasure to be able to have that routine of slowing down, of smelling the coffee, of really enjoying how it tasted.
Yeah.
That was pleasure. The second thing was I like to sit outside this time of year.
Mhm.
I'm in Colorado, the mornings are crisp. It just brings me so much joy to spend 5 minutes outside.
Yes.
That is pleasure. The third thing I did was I was trying to decide what to have for breakfast, and I just couldn't make a decision. And so I started to think about what it would be like to eat my options. So I could have yogurt, and you can taste the yogurt on your tongue and how the texture and the fat content and how it would feel. Or I could make an egg and have something that I could really bite down into and really feel like it had substance to it. Um, and so it's just allowing yourself to experience everyday activities in a much more deep and meaningful way. And that is an invitation, a very easy way to start to develop your pleasure practice of getting in touch with what
Yes.
lights you up.
That's so good. For me this morning, knowing that we were going to be having this time together, I went out and gardened and I had this really interesting, we're still developing the homestead land that we're on. My grandparents had planted a whole row of black walnuts, and black walnuts give out an acid or an oil that other lots of other plants are like, thank you, but no, this is not an environment for me to grow in. So it's been a science project the time that we've been here about finding what's going to grow underneath these trees. And I found that the things that I had been planting were starting to actually bloom. They are fall bloomers, autumn bloomers. And I was just so excited to see that they were starting to have flowers and I could start to see the color of them. It wasn't the color that I thought they were going to be. In that space, I felt I was getting sweaty. I didn't put my gloves on. I had hands in the dirt. It just felt so, so, so good. And I felt alive. And I thought, oh, this is just, it's incredible to have this space and time, knowing that the things I had to get done were done. And I had this space that I could just enjoy being outside, feeling the breeze. And I think that both of us are talking about coming to a place that we're talking about the five senses and using those to help communicate to us if we like something or not. Some people have a strong aversion to certain types of textures, either for wearing them or for eating them. And so becoming just more aware of the nuances of life, the nuances of space. I know that last night I just had this song in my brain and I thought, if I can just sit down and play the piano, I will enjoy this song. I'll have it out of my brain. I may keep humming it every now and then, but it won't be this like pressing, hey, get to the piano and play a little bit. And so that for me was that moment of pleasure, of joy, of just taking in that space. It wasn't long. It was just though being present in that space.
Yes, I love that. And as you were describing your gardening, I was in my mind, I was like, oh, I wonder if she had her gloves off and she really got
Yes.
her hands dirty. So I love that you
Yes.
added that in. That's really easy
Yes.
to visualize.
Mhm.
I think part of this process too is realizing that as we age, as we grow, as we mature, what brings us pleasure changes. And we change how we eat, how we exercise, what shows we watch on TV, what music we listen to, how our hair looks, how we dress. But we don't think about updating our pleasure practice as we change and evolve as well. And so finding and just bringing awareness and attention to what brings you pleasure during the day is a beautiful and very accessible way to start.
That is so, so good. And you will find perhaps that there are some themes of things that you liked as a child that you still enjoy now. And there may be things that have really radically changed, or as you become friends with new people who have new likes and desires and things that may open doors as well. I think that part of that is about being curious,
Mhm.
about wondering, and having that wonderment, I think, is such a beautiful thing. For people who are living in cities, I love that you've talked about, having a beverage in the morning that you enjoy, having a space at this time of the season that you can get outside and appreciate the crispness. For people who are living, say, in New York City, a super metropolis area, what advice would you give them about how to find pleasure in a place that some people call a concrete jungle?
Yes, and I just got back from New York City. I love New York City. So, as I was walking around the city, I was just struck with wonder and awe at how many people have created these unique and individual lives in this very small space as we go up, and just thinking of how many ways there are to connect with people around us, and just how amazing humans are to create this very condensed living space that can be so specialized and unique, because you could speak with 100 people in New York City and they would all have a very different way of living and interacting with the environment around them. I love that New Yorkers walk so much, and so it's that connection and that speed and that pace and that energy of moving, of going somewhere, being on a journey. I love that so many New Yorkers have little bodegas and coffee shops that they can grab something, and they have these delicious food everywhere. And there's so many sounds, and those sounds can be, if we choose, they can be overwhelming, but there are times when you can just allow a little bit of it to come in and just let the sound reverberate inside of you, and let it feel like what it is to be in such an area of generation and excitement and energy. And then, of course, there's always Central Park. There's always the walkway along the water to have that connection back to nature too. It's I'm always struck when I'm in New York City that little pockets of green of nature are just hidden in little spots around, and you can find them. Just change what you look for. Yeah.
I love that. And I love the idea also that the people who are planning the city in many, many cities have done this or are coming back to doing this, of making sure that there are spaces that are green, or making sure that, I know I'd read an article years ago about New York that there were places that they had put on the top of a building certain kinds of grasses that bees liked, so that bees would be coming into the city. And I just thought, oh, that's a cool idea, of people just saying, hey, how can we help nature do the things that are important for it to be doing, even though we are going to continue to grow up? And I think that was such an incredible space. As you are coaching, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your story of coming into this space, of what worked for our listeners who are considering perhaps starting their own business, and what were some things that you found to be a bit more challenging, and then how did you work through those challenges to get to where you are today?
Um, I think what has worked for me is to share from a place of service and authenticity, to
Definitely.
really be about connecting with people and impacting one person at a time, and just seeing like who can I serve today? How can I be of service today? How can I help connect? How can I help someone feel seen today? That very personal aspect of the business is, I think, very helpful, and it feels right for me to have this heart-led business of being about helping people rather than being solely focused on the bottom line, and
Yes.
allowing it to grow organically, almost like a garden, that when we're planting the seeds, that we're going to allow the appropriate amount of time for it to germinate, for me to develop the skills as not just a coach, but as a business owner, because those are two very different skills. Um,
Very.
mhm. And so that would be the first thing, is really to get clear on, how do you want to be led? Do you want to be solely led by financials, or do you have the space to allow it to be a heart-led endeavor? The second thing, the challenge, I would say, is some of those business aspects, because
Mhm.
coaching is one thing, but being a business owner, doing the marketing, doing the financials, doing the business planning, the logistics of what it means and how to set up your space, whether it's online or in person, those are a different skill set than many people may be bringing into being a coach. And so for that, it's been helpful for me to create a network of other entrepreneurs who are in a similar space, and I can reach out to for support and suggestions and advice and assistance. And then with the expectation that I'll be able to provide that kind of guidance to people who are coming in behind me.
Yes. I think for me, part of the business is I would know that I had a need. And then the first person who seemed to fit that need, I would think, oh, this must be the person I need to work with, rather than taking the time to really ask questions and to see their portfolio or to talk through how communication works and some of those kinds of things. I just figured if I was coming into business and they were already in business, that they would have all those pieces figured out. And that was something for me. It took me a little while to kind of figure out that one, I didn't know what I didn't know, and learning to ask those questions and be willing to come back around again and just for clarification. That took me a while to figure that out, because the education part, I was trained teacher. That part made sense. You create the curriculum, you follow the curriculum, you tweak the curriculum, knowing that after you've taught. As a mentor teacher, we would say to our brand new teachers coming to the classroom, once you've taught this curriculum 5 different times, you will own it. So just trust the process. Know that the first year of any new curriculum that comes in is going to feel awkward for everybody who's been teaching, no matter how long they've been teaching, because it's the first time through. And so just giving yourself that space and that time to develop and to experience and to learn it through the process of doing that.
Yes, I love that, and I love you. This is, as I've told you, like you keep saying that repetition is necessary for learning, and I love putting that in the context of being a business owner, of not just learning, but that experiential process of teaching, of learning how to navigate and interact with your clients is something that it takes practice, it takes repetition to find what
Yes.
works for you.
Yes. Yes. So as you are looking at what you are creating, getting ready to launch, what have been some of the pieces with that you have really enjoyed working on? Knowing that when you create a course, you have the content, you're going to have modules, there might be some technology involved, maybe creating some videos, there could be letter writing, some campaign to do, some marketing along the way. In the vast pieces that all fit together for a launch, what are the ones that you have found have been ones that you go to bed with a smile on your face?
No, I love that question. I really like my ability to take ideas and concepts that people may not initially connect with pleasure, and really tie them together in an unexpected way. I love when I create a teaching video that invites people to look at themselves just a little bit differently, and then to
Mm.
take that information and show up in the world differently. It's just a really fun process to take a tidbit of information and then sit with it and think about ways that I can infuse my own life experience into. I
Can
just
you
find
give
it.
us an example of that, finding unique ways or ideas that people haven't thought about, and then being able to bring them back into the space of pleasure?
Oh, yes. Let's see if I can think of one. So part of part of the process of what I do is to really get to examine our origin story. I was reading a book about it was about like human development, human attachment, and it just struck me of how often, as we are in relationships, as we are in intimacy, as we are looking for pleasure, we are craving something that has a tie back to what we didn't feel like we got as a young human, and to be able to release some of the shame we feel around our desires and our fantasies, and to be like, what if we just took a little bit different look at this and not think of this as something that's wrong with us, but think of it as an invitation to bring something into our life that felt like it's been missing, so that there's no judgment on what we're asking for, and maybe even softening and getting curious about desire, and putting a little bit more neutral spin on it, so that we take away that shame, that judgment, that thinking that there's something wrong with me, that this is what I'm seeking, and find a way to pursue it within your current value setup, or morals, and in a healthy way. And it can start to allow people to feel much more comfortable with, again, those parts of themselves they hide away, because they think, why in the world did this thought come into my mind?
Right.
Because we're human.
Right. Oh, I love that idea of softening, right? We can feel like there's been such judgment, or the way that we were taught or told. I have a high school PE teacher that I'm thinking of right now, that, this was the way things had to be. And I understood that, and it worked really, really well for her. But as she was training the rest of us, I don't know that it was always working for the rest of us, right? And so that space of, my body doesn't do that like that. I can't jump like that. I can't, basketball's not my thing. And for her and for other people, it absolutely was. And so even those kinds of things, of taking those and being able to say, soften that, and go, could I have fun with the bowling ball? Are there other kinds of spheres that I could, just be active with, and not necessarily have to feel like, if I can't do basketball, I can't do anything. So interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, and I love that. And that brings up the idea of dancing. That's something that we do on our own in my course as well. Is so many of us, when I say, okay, just spend 5 minutes dancing, and you think, I can't dance. Like, what? I don't even know. I did a challenge last year where I did 100 days of dancing, and I would just decide, okay, well, what song speaks to me? Is it something from my teenage years? Is it something instrumental? Like, what song does my body want to hear? And then just allowing my body to move. And it's a very strange sensation, if you're not a dancer, to dance the first time, because it feels so awkward and it feels so wrong, and it is a practice that you get into. But again, like, embracing dance, not because you are going to be in a ballet, or because you're going to be on some TV show, but just because your body wants to express itself, is such a beautiful way of reconnecting with your body.
Yeah, I love that. There's another television host who, when we want to do specials, we always work with her, and she's South African. And Sinette is somebody who, anytime that you have coffee with her, and we do these, she'll reach out to people, and she had this whole desire to do hundreds of these coffee dates within a certain period of time. But always ahead of time, Sinette would always say, what's your favorite song? And I thought, that's a really interesting question. I have no idea what she wants to do with it or why. And so I thought, the song that I had just heard that had really moved me, had been a live performance, and for actually Martin Luther King Jr. And there was a high school senior who sang along with the local orchestra, the Ave Maria. Just the way that she held herself, the confidence, the poise, the leaning into the words in Latin, all of it. It was just, I have goosebumps just telling you about it. It was just such an incredible experience. And then the acoustics in this particular place were phenomenal as well. And so I sent this along to her, because I just thought, and so at the end of coffee, she always plays the song and has you dance to it. And I thought, really? We're going to be dancing to this? This is what? It was just this beautiful flowing, and, she's dancing along as well. And she doesn't care if you're watching her or not, and just being present. But Sinette just wants everybody to be connecting indifferently with songs that they love. And truly, I hadn't danced in decades when she said, okay, it's time for us to dance. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay. So I love that idea of you dancing for 100 straight days, and just feeling into your body what song you wanted to dance with.
yeah, is it fast? Is it slow? Is it like, what is it? But I love that idea of just dancing. And you can imagine that. I can imagine how it must have caught you off guard. And also like, what a great move. I love that.
Yeah. So her song is Dancing on Sunshine.
Hmm.
And so there were several of us then who were being interviewed by her, and we were all on screen together. And at the end of it, she said, "Okay, I'm going to play my song and everybody's going to dance." And the funniest part for me, because I had coffee with her, right? Virtually. And so I knew this was going could be possible. And the men who were on the show, it was just, to me, it was just the most beautiful thing to watch them go, really? We're being asked to dance. We're doing this on an international show. Oh, I think I need to figure this out. It was just that space of play. And I just loved that for all of us. It was good.
Yeah, and you raise a really interesting point. When I did my challenge, most of the days I did them on my own because,
Mhm.
my kids are often doing things.
Yes.
But there were a few days where the girls were home, and so we'd say, "Okay, let's put on." I think I don't know, one of the shows on TV. You can like one of the video games you can dance to, and so we do that together, which was so fun.
So
Or get
fun.
your partner involved and build that community, so it's not just you that's having this amazing experience with your body, but it's allowing and creating that vulnerability of letting somebody watch you dance when you haven't danced in years. And
Yes.
vulnerability breeds connection. So that's a beautiful thing to do.
It absolutely does. Um, I love, I can just, in my mind, I'm seeing you with your kids dancing and just having a great time and giggling and just enjoying that together time, that experience.
Yeah, and my
So
kids were teenagers, so it wasn't like they were little ones who would be totally up for anything, because somewhere along the line we become self-conscious about our bodies dancing. So yeah, to
yes,
bring back into that space.
that's so good. So if people are interested in growing in this particular area, I know that you've talked about looking at ways that we can just in a day, every day, be
Mhm,
experiencing some level of pleasure. Um, what would you say to somebody who feels like they're in a very, very rigid job,
mhm.
and they might even be the owner of the company and feel like, I don't have space. And what we are doing is we're creating these widgets, and they've got to be precise because they are for aerospace, and they've got to do, and everything has to be just so. How, is it important or possible for that person to begin to create levels of things that they enjoy or awareness around those things?
Absolutely. And I think that's where, most of my clients are from North America, from the United States and Canada. And so we have sort of similar cultures of really having this energy of production, of just, you can just feel yourself tight because you have long to-do lists and you're in your head all day and you're trying to map out where the kids all need to be and what we're going to have for dinner and who's going where. And so it can feel like you don't have the space to just let yourself relax. And that really is the first step of just finding 5 minutes, maybe
Mhm.
before work or after work or on the way home. Like, change up how you come home. If you usually have the news on, maybe turn it off. If you usually have music on really loud, maybe turn it off. Just switch up a little bit and see how that space can shift your body's ability to unfurl, to open. And I think we also have this tendency to overcomplicate things. I
Mm.
was thinking, like, if you think, okay, what would bring you pleasure? And maybe someone is thinking, well, what would really bring me pleasure is to have my backyard be full of rose bushes and just dance through the roses. Yes, that would be lovely, but that's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money. Maybe we start with just picking up a dozen roses when we go get our groceries and displaying them in a different way. Instead of having one big vase, put a few small buds around the house so that you're always seeing that pop of color, that beautiful scent, that
Yes.
reminder that we are connected to nature. My
Mm.
suggestion would be to start very small. And that
Mhm.
could be, again, changing how you come home from work, allowing yourself to decompress before you walk in your front door, to change the way that you breathe, to just pay attention to your breathing breathing for 5 minutes, to do something like lying with your legs up on against the wall and just giving yourself 3 minutes
Mhm.
to let the day wash off of you.
Okay.
Because yeah, it can be really difficult if we feel crunched for time to
Mhm.
think about adding in a pleasure practice. But
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be a 3 hour or process. It doesn't have to be
Right.
transforming an entire part of your house. It could just be
Mhm.
creating a little bit of beauty in a different part of your home. Um, so yeah, it, get in touch with what sounds good and then simplify it.
Mm.
Make it
Krista,
easy.
I absolutely adore that. I think that the idea of simplifying, find out, and then simplify is so important because in the past, I have put all of my eggs in one basket of I'm going to do this big thing. And then this big thing often has other people involved in it somehow. And then maybe they don't end up wanting to do that particular thing, or they don't necessarily want to go, or if they do, they've had a bad day. And now I feel like that just kind of washes over to the experience. And even though I'm there having the experience, it's not filling my soul, filling my being. It's just an experience. It's not doing what I wanted it to do,
Mhm.
of expanding who I am. And so I love this idea of doing these small practices, simplify them, and the big ones may come and go, and they may be spectacular and phenomenal. And I want that for
Mhm.
everybody. But if they aren't that, if there is disappointment with that, that practice of still coming back and honoring yourself, there's a level of self respect, it feels like, as I'm sharing this, right? About just taking what you're saying about simplifying and then doing. It's
Mhm.
respecting yourself. When we say that we're going to do something, then we do it actually builds our own inner confidence. And so, as you're talking about this with pleasure, it's going to also build that confidence that way as well.
Yes, and I think another way to look at it is, when we do our business trainings together, when we were working together, oh, we will often set a goal. And so maybe our goal in this context would be, I want to have an hour a week with my partner.
Mhm.
And so finding an hour in your schedule where you're both feeling rested enough to connect can be tricky. So
Right.
what we say to each other is, great, that's your goal. What can you do in the next 24 hours to start moving toward that goal? And
Yeah.
so maybe it is spending 5 minutes after dinner or while you're making dinner saying, here's something that really lit me up today. What did you do today that made you feel alive? And just starting very, very small.
Mm.
And then you can start building on that. So again, it's this idea that we're in a practice, that we're taking
Yes.
steps together along the way, that we don't have to have instant gratification or instant idea of this goal. And
Yeah.
often as we take these baby steps, our goals can change.
Sure.
Or we may feel that we can get that connection, that filling your heart in a slightly different way.
There's been conversations about having date nights, consistent date nights. And I've heard people who are not in partnership talking about having date night with themselves.
Mm.
How important do you think that those practices can be for self care?
I think they are incredibly, incredibly important. And this is another great example of how we can overcomplicate things, because then I hear clients saying, well, we had date night set for Friday, but Friday came along and I was just too tired. And the thought of going out to dinner just sounded awful. And so we just stayed home and sat on the couch. So I would like to challenge people to change the idea of what date night could be.
Mm.
And how do you simplify it? And what I have discovered in my relationship is that I can get what I want out of date night by simply changing where I sit in the house. So it
Mm.
could be, instead of, we tend to maybe gravitate to where the TV is after dinner or to your reading chairs. Like, what would it be if you stayed at the kitchen table? What would it be if you sat on your front porch? What would it be if you took a walk around the block and just connected that way? Like, that
Mhm.
would be date night. Get really clear on what your intention is. If your
Mm.
intention is to have this great big night on the town, okay, but like, what? what is the intention underneath that? What were you seeking? Maybe it was excitement. Maybe it was novelty. It was something new. So how can you create that in your home? How can you create that without spending money, without needing to line up with a babysitter? These are all ways that we create false obstacles for ourselves to get
Mm,
actually are seeking. And that is to be seen, to be held, to feel connected to ourselves or to our loved one.
mm. That's so good. And I love how you were the one in our business coaching group that brought up the accountability group, this idea of, yes, set your goals, but then what can you do in the next 24 hours to move towards that so that
Mhm.
you're taking these small steps along the way. And I love that you are practicing that not just in these spaces, but also in the business space as well. Because the long goal is the long goal. It's the piece that's way out there, the thing that our heart is pulling us towards, and we are building towards that. But it is a process of staying committed to that. And I think also that Jim Rohn, a business coach who wrote so much and did so many speeches, he talked about, if you need to sit and rest for a minute, but then get right back up and get at it. Like, don't just stop and say, whew, I'm going to take 3 weeks off, because that's too long, unless you've built it into your culture of your business.
Mhm.
Uh, and there are times that we do need to have that real downtime. But for the most part, that space of discouragement, or the space of, this is just taking way longer than I thought it was going to, or I did it and then the technology didn't work with it, so I need to go back and figure that part of it out. Giving yourself that grace, that space to be able to say, I'm taking one step forward towards the next, and it may take longer than I expected, but I'm going to do it and maybe committed to doing that.
Yeah, I love that. And I would even add another layer of celebration. When we have these long goals, you need to celebrate every little step along the way. Otherwise, you can't tell you're moving closer to your goal. Those celebrations are milestones. And so if you have this goal of having date night every week, and yet what you've managed is a 2-minute conversation of where neither of you are showing up as a parent, as a spouse, as a household manager, but you're just showing up authentically human.
Yes.
Celebrate that. Be like, we
Yes.
did that. That, like, life is so busy. The kids are everywhere, but we
Yes.
found time to be seen, to connect with each other or with yourself. Again, if you're not in a relationship, but yeah, that,
Yes.
that celebration is important. And again, celebrations don't have to be this big thing. It can be a little dance. It can be just really feeling in your body how joyful it is and sharing it with each
Yes.
other. It's
Yes.
simple is good.
Simple is good. Oh, I love that. Yes, absolutely. Krista, as you look at where you have been working with corporate America, choosing to awaken, choosing to have your own business, be coaching, where do you see yourself in 10, 15 years? What do you see that you're growing towards?
Mm, I part of the process, and as you're describing this, I'm thinking of who I was before I left my job and who I am now. And one of the ways that I've really grown is being able to identify and name and own my emotions. And so that just adds such a layer of expansion and grounding and openness. And so as I continue to think like 10 years into the future and what adventures are in store and what the possibilities are, it just feels like an opening around me. I have no idea what's going to happen over the next 10 years, but I know it's going to be a continued growth and expansion and connection, to myself, to my partner, to my children, to others, to clients, to collaborators. It's just this really exciting idea that there's so much more life that's out there, and that will unfold. And as I continue to connect with myself, the path is going to unfold. And
Mm. I love your trust in that, because it's exactly what's going to happen. But I love that you know that and that you trust the process as well. That's beautiful.
I've never been very good at setting 5-year goals or 10-year goals
Mm.
because my life has unfolded in such unexpected ways. I could never
Yes.
have imagined this life that I have. And so I love taking care of myself today, to kind of dreaming very vaguely about the future,
Mhm.
but being open to whatever comes along.
Yeah. And I agree with you that there are these things that if our heart is open, if we are open to, that there are truly spectacular things that do show up and doors that do open. Had I been just focused only on this is the only way, I would have never seen the possibility of. As you talked about emotional granularity, how
Mhm.
did you work on expanding your vocabulary from the typical, glad, sad, mad kind of a thing?
Mhm. I downloaded an emotional wheel off the internet and just started to get really curious. When I had this sensation in my body that I didn't understand, I was
Mm.
like, "Okay, what is it glad, sad, mad, angry? What is it?" And then let's go a level deeper. Let's see these
Yes.
words here and see if I can get more precise. So it is just a way to, um, yeah, it's a way to learn about yourself and to start to lean into who you are and to start to work with your kids too. As I did this, my kids were young teenagers and start to get like, let's look at this and tell me which one you're feeling. And watching them learn that is a way to also um, help you identify it as well.
Is there anything that you'd like to reiterate that you want our listeners to walk away and go, yes, I've got to work on that, or I need to think about that differently. I need to be curious about that differently.
Yes, well, I would really like to reiterate that we are all responsible for our own pleasure. You can't outsource this to somebody else. And I know we sometimes would like to. It'd be so much easier if we let somebody else do it, but we are responsible for our own pleasure, and that pleasure should be an activity of daily living. This is not something that needs to be earned. This is not something that you only do after you meet a big goal. This is something that you embrace every day.
Mm. Life is to be lived, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, and to be enjoyed. And it doesn't start when you reach a certain career milestone or you get the boyfriend or the husband or the wife or the girlfriend. It
Yeah.
is to be, or the right body. It is everyday pleasure. That is, yes, I agree. Life is to be
Yes.
lived.
Yes. Wow. Well, Krista, as you continue to work on things, we would love to have you come back and share more with us. I think that what you were working on is something that every single generation can profit from. It makes the fabric of their life richer. And thank you so much for sharing this time with us today.
I love speaking with you. I'm so grateful for this chance to connect with you and your community, and I look forward to coming back.
Beautiful. And to our audience, we just say thank you so much for being here, for listening to the end, for taking all of this in. We are so excited about this space of you taking time, whether it's that cup of coffee, a cup of tea, the opportunity to wash your feet in a different way, whatever it is that brings you a moment of saying, I am practicing self care in a different way, in a way that works for me, a way that I like. We celebrate that. And we will see you next time.